Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at the Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. You know what? I have to stop you. I have to stop because you've only got me on the camera.
I'll switch it.
But, okay, can we start over? Because I like to, it helps me when we're using the reruns to just have everybody on the camera to start with.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, though. Thanks. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Tom, too. So we thank both of our producers here, and we also thank WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station, being coming out of Buffalo State University. Thank you, WBNY 91.3 FM. And when I think of gratitude, I think of our indigenous friends and our friends of color that in spite of all kinds of hardships and certainly in the case of indigenous people that have been had their land stolen and taken through violence and trickery and all kinds of oppression that they've had, or our black friends who have been people were enslaved and brought against their will to this country and treated so abominably for so long and often still, that still thankfulness is so important, and that the indigenous people start every meeting with what they call the words that come before all else, a gnonyo, which thanks Mother Earth, which thanks the people who were involved, as we just did. Thanks Mother Earth for holding us up and giving us everything we need for a good life. Thanks the plants and the animals, all the different phenomena around us in nature, here on Earth, and also in the sky world, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Thankful for the love that makes it all happen, and to the Creator. And so then when they've said all of that, then they would say Nyahweh, and then the people would say Nyo. So I'll say Nyahweh, and then
Nyo.
Thank you.
Nyo.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to our guests. I've been wanting to do a show about this for quite a while. We're going to focus on school suspension. So school suspensions and the school to prison pipeline, of which school suspensions play such a major and horrific part. So I want to say I'm very thrilled that we have here Samantha White. Sam White is the supervising attorney on the school discipline project of the Western New York Law Center. So we're grateful, Sam, that you're here.
Thank you for uplifting this topic. Suspensions are something that people tend to shy away from. Yeah. And so thanks for making the time to do this.
Oh, please. No, I think it's so important. And also we have Kerry Gant with us. Kerry is a restorative justice practitioner, teacher, instructor, and is also on special assignment in Rochester Public Schools. Kerry, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so glad that you were able to make it, coming in from Rochester area. And
Yes.
last but not least, we have John Walker. John, it's so good to see you. John was suspended as a child and went through all kinds of hardships, which included, last but not least, just horrific being framed by the Erie County police, and especially the district attorney's office, and just, had a long road to some justice, and still got the justice determination from a jury of his peers for $28 million, and meanwhile the county is still fighting it, and so their bad deeds continue. Welcome, John.
Thank you. I'm glad to be a part of y'all little thing here tonight.
Oh, we're so grateful. We're so grateful. Your story will tell. It says it all, really. So, so we'll just. But before we get started rolling and on the specifics, what we like to think about people's values that relate to this topic. So, when you think of school suspensions, when you think of the school to prison pipeline, what are the values that you want, that you think of as really being most important in the discussion? So we'll just go around in a circle. We'll start with in this, just like we did. So Sam?
Yeah, so for me, I try and center my core values around the idea that every child deserves dignity, equity, and a meaningful education, right?
Right.
We want public education to be a tool for freedom, for opportunity, to make it to a better life. And I think one of the most important core values for me is that discipline inside the schools should center around justice, accountability, and healing, not just punishment.
Right.
Our
Right.
children are not disposable. They can't be pushed out into the world, into void. We need to nurture them and move them forward. So those are my core values.
Right. Thank you so much, Sam. And Kerry, what would you say?
I would agree with Sam, first of all.
Sure.
And I also would say that, so two things I would add to that, we know that kids do well if they can. If they can do well, they will. If we set them up for success, they will. If we look at the strengths that our students have and focus on them and not come from a deficit mindset or a punitive mindset, then we've already really gotten half the battle, right? So we need to meet them where they are. We need to start with their strengths, and we need to know that kids do want to learn. They do want to be in school, and if they can do well, they will.
Thanks, Kerry. And John, what would you say?
I'll say we need to find some place for them when they get suspended to try to teach them in different ways. Maybe do some of the community program people that's in our communities come in at that time, or maybe parents that might want to do something. Because when you suspend them and just send them home, that stops the learning right there. So I think that they should keep them in the school and find something different for them to do during that suspension time. Sending them home is doing them no good. It's like the learning stops. So find something else to do instead of sending them home when they suspended.
Thank you, John. So clear, so true. I would just, I can't resist always saying truth and love. So the truth of the matter that is the issue that is even bringing up any need for discipline is, needs to be explored and then, it lovingly dealt with. So just rejecting a child and pushing them out really isn't going to solve anything. And in fact, what we've seen is just how much it doesn't solve things. It just creates problems. So they need to be in school. And if we can't deal, how are they going to, what are they learning when they just get pushed out? So it's so counterproductive. It's just been crazy to me. And it's a real admission of failure on the part of the school.
Yeah.
So we need, and really each of you said in different ways, there are so many other things other than just push somebody away. That's not a learning experience.
The one people that the kids don't respect is the parents. So why don't the schools have programs where parents come in on day and they might be able to watch their child in school, and that might get them incentive to do the right thing and don't get so much suspensions.
Well, it's yes, definitely getting parents more involved in schools is definitely a big help and a big way of really helping to reset the stage and help parents to help their children and to really be part of a whole team. So anyway, so if we can just let's talk a little bit about what is the current situation with the policies, what's happening in schools. I think that both you, Sam, and Kerry will have more to say about that, but, we'll still go around. So, Sam, what would you say?
Yeah, so I can talk generally about New York State. Some of the school districts across the state still use the zero tolerance policies when it comes to discipline, where even a minor misbehavior can result in a suspension. Now, some districts have different policies on paper versus what is actually put into practice. And then I think that's kind of where we are in working locally here in Buffalo with the Buffalo Public Schools. Now, I want to be really clear in saying that I look at the school district as a partner and look forward to continuing to grow our relationship together as we explore ways to improve suspension policies within the school district. However, what we have seen when we look at the data, when we look at the statistics, is that Buffalo continues to be a top suspending school district statewide.
Really?
6 out of the last 7 years, we've led the state in suspensions. Almost 7,000 suspensions, actually more than 7,000 suspensions last year, and we're on track to beat that for this year. We still got a month left, so we are in the races. The crazy thing about it is we only have 30,000 students. While we're suspending almost 15% of our student body, cities like New York City, with a population of, million students, they're suspending like 1%. So,
Wow.
So we have some work to do. We can look at policies from those districts. And I understand New York City is different. New York City is a different beast. But we have similarly situated small upstate cities like Syracuse that are using pretty much the same policies as New York. And it helped to reduce the racial disparities that we see here in Buffalo. Because guess what? Children of color, they're being suspended 2.5 times more than their Caucasian counterparts for the short-term suspensions, 3.9 times more for the long-term suspensions. When you hit the intersection of race and disability, if you look at an African-American student with an IEP, guess what? He's like 6.5 times more likely to be suspended than a white counterpart without a learning disability. So, I mean, we need to take children that need support, provide support with special education services, with mentoring, by involving the community, by bringing stakeholders in to lift these children up, to help support our teachers, to help support our institutions like our public schools, so that we can have the outcomes that our children deserve.
Thank you, Sam. Absolutely. Wow, those figures are scary and
Yeah.
stunning. Kerry?
Yeah, I would once again agree with Sam. And so the district that I work in, so we're actually a large suburban district outside of the Rochester, outside of Rochester, but we're seeing the same outcomes as what Sam described, right? Like our Black and brown students are suspended at a higher rate than our white students are, particularly when we talk about our special education students. So that is certainly true in our district. But our district is, so my position is one of the responses to these disparities. So
Right.
I am the restorative practices teacher on special assignment. Our school district has 4 high schools. We have 18 schools altogether, 4 high schools. My building is a 612 building, so we have both middle school and high school housed in one building. And so for us, it's a restorative mindset, and it starts with the principal, right? So the principal has a restorative mindset, and so that is what guides all of the systems in our school. And not to say that it's perfect; it is not perfect. We are working on building our restorative systems within the already existing systems within the school. We are working at all three tiers. So in school districts, we categorize our intervention by tiers. So our tier 1 would be our preventative services for that are all students. So these are skill development. This is your social emotional learning, and then we have our tier 2, and this would be for a more targeted group of scholars, and then we have our tier 3. And when you get to tier 3 is when we see the suspension. So what we're doing and what we're focusing on is working with our community partners. We have community partners that work with us, and we're working to develop skills, because what we know is that behavior is communication. So when we have scholars that are acting out, they are communicating. And it is up to us to find what the function of that behavior is and what that communication that they're trying to tell us is, and then meet that need, whether that is a skill deficit that we have to come in and do. We do character connection workshops. So we go through the restorative questions, and then we meet, with the scholar in a series of sessions, so that we're targeting that specific skill or that specific need that has to be met in the scholar. Because I agree with John. When kids are suspended, they're not learning, and a lot of the times, that's when they're getting into more trouble, right? So we want to have them in school. We welcome them in the school, and it really is up to us as adults and educators in the school to find out, what's the function of the behavior, and then how we can meet that need, that's there, and that communication that they're giving us. So for us, that's kind of where we're at. We are, like I said, it's not perfect, but those are kind of the things that are the current state of our building.
Right. Well, that's good. It sounds like there's a lot of progress being made, working in that direction. So, John, now I think, you might, if you have something to say about the current state of the schools, or you could tell your story of your own, how your own suspension sort of moved you in a direction that ended up resulting in your being framed and you're spending 21, was it 21 or 22? I always get confused.
20 in prison, but
and then all the years of parole as well. So so please, John.
one thing I would say we should try to do is highlight those statistics that you ran up, because when I heard the statistic, it kind of like made me, think about it. So I think that we highlight them statistics more, parents will hear that and trying to get more together to do something and try to have something. I think that if we have plans for kids and we present those plans to them while their parents are standing right there with them, they'll take them plans more serious. I just think that it's a must that we get parents more involved with the kids these days in school. They're the only one the kids seem to be wanting to respect if their parents standing there. So I think if you get them in front of their parent and present something to them, and they tell their parents standing right there, I'm going to achieve that, I think they'll work harder right there. I think all the thing I'm trying to say is that parents need to be more involved with the kids, and those statistics that you just ran off, that should interest parents. But somehow we got to get them to hear those statistics.
Well, thank you. That is a very, very important aspect, and it's been true right along to me that that back to team, that you have a support team, that the student has a support team. So those are people in his life or her life that are interested in helping. So that's teachers and, different special assignment teachers, or, anyone who's in their life, and they're above all their parents, above all. And so often there's like a schism between the school and the family because people are busy, and as you're saying, it's
I just had
very
my son
important.
in school last year, and I tried to tell him, let me come in and talk to the student. Let me come in and watch my son, what he's doing. And I'm sure he wouldn't do no bad things no more if I was standing there with him. But they have policies that parents can't come into school.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. There's a sort of a disconnect, and some of that is, I think it's a want for control. It's a little bit of a paranoia, maybe, that parents might be criticizing or disrupting or something. But there's reasons that, why ever it is the norm that there's not a lot of porousness in the school of people coming in and out of the school. So that's one of the things. So maybe as we go around, you can respond a little bit to that about back to what the policies are and also what they could be. So, Sam?
So in terms of parent access, I can't really speculate on that limitation. Some of it may have to do with security.
Sure.
There may have been
I'm
prior
sure.
incidents. So
Right.
that's above my pay grade. So
Okay.
I can't
Right,
dip
right.
and dive into that.
Okay.
In terms of the community coming together and bringing those resources in and, partnering with parents, we have 6 different parent groups in Buffalo Public Schools that really fiercely advocate for children.
Sure.
We have students that are self-advocating and learning how to become their own self-advocates.
Oh, good.
We need to support that work. We need to make sure that as many children are trained in being community health workers so that they can be peer leaders and help in demonstrating that restorative work. I think it really does come down to what Kerry was discussing, that shift from the disciplinary to the restorative.
Right.
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 Right. Shouldn't be no-
Terry and Kerry, what would
Yes.
you say? And so,
Yeah,
what do you think about parent involvement, et cetera? Where is it? Where isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's going to vary across school districts and, even across buildings. I think
Right.
that varies even with our district across buildings. And that comes from leadership in the building, right? So I know that in our building, our principal welcomes parents to come in.
Really?
There are privacy concerns. I mean, legally
Sure.
there are concerns, but there are also ways to work around that. I mean, certainly, I don't know if a parent could sit in a whole entire class with their child. I think there might be some privacy concerns with other people's children in that classroom. However, we have suggested to parents, around chronic skipping. We have suggested that parents come in and escort their children to their class, and then they can sit in the office, or we have a space for them where they can sit in between classes, and then they can go, pick their scholar up and bring them to their next class. And we have found, actually, I've been teaching for almost 25 years now, and I can count on one hand how many parents were not involved in their child's education at all, or didn't want to be involved. The large majority of parents are willing to be involved. They want their kids to succeed. They want their kids to graduate.
Right.
They They want them to achieve their goals, and they want to partner with the schools to do that. So I do think that the best policy is to, have that partnership and work with that, work with parents, and, and even if it is a phone call, if there's a behavior that a child is displaying, and, I'll just go with the chronic skipping example. What we have started to do is, round the kids up. If they're in the bathroom, we'll round them up. We take them to the principal's office, and then, the principal or myself or one of our other staff members support staff. And I think that's an important key to this, is having enough support staff in the building so that, when you have these issues, that you have the right people that are responding to this, that you don't have always a security response or a carceral response to it, that we have a supportive response.
Right.
So, but calling parents right there and then handing the phone to the child, and the parent is the one that's telling them, look, you better get it together and you better get to class, because, this is going to be the consequence at home. And, so it really is about that partnership.
Right.
I do want to acknowledge, I do see a question on the screen about drug related incidents at school. And yes, that is an issue, but we have to, and it's the same thing with cell phones, right? We're finding that kids are being suspended for vaping. They're being suspended for using cell phones because we have cell phone policies that are codified in our code of conducts, right? And cell phones are a distraction. They are the impetus to many of the conflicts that end up in fights in school. So there are very real reasons to have those policies, but we have to approach it from a public health standpoint and not a punitive standpoint, right? The reason why kids are using their cell phones is because they are addicted to it. The reason why kids are vaping in the bathrooms is because there is an addiction there. So you have to address the underlying cause and get to that root cause of what's causing the behavior, and then you can apply the correct intervention so that we can keep kids in school and get them to graduation.
Could I actually touch on that question for a second?
Sure.
Let me just read it off.
Yeah.
How many of those suspensions are, quote, drug related to, and then we isolate them through more suspensions? So first off, you can actually see how many suspensions are occurring and what types and which school buildings and what the different categories are through the Buffalo Public Schools. They actually have a data dashboard.
Right.
What we see is that the majority of suspensions are actually not drug related. The top two suspending categories would be for fighting. Actually, I think the top three. Fights, followed by insubordination, followed by, I believe it's disrespectful behavior.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
And if you combine insubordination and disrespectful behavior, those two categories actually top out fights. And those two categories are the ones that are predominantly used to suspend children of color. It also allows for bias to creep in. What is insubordination?
Right.
What is disrespectful behavior? Is that a cultural clash, or is this something that is legitimate and founded? If we're talking about, improper language, should that be something that prevents a student from learning the next 5 days or the next 27 days?
Yeah.
That's questions that need to be asked of our leadership for the school district, as well as our families. They need to answer those questions too. As a parent, you need to think about, what type of school do you want your child attending? Me personally, I want my child to go to a school with that restorative touch to it, with that willingness to let children learn and grow.
Right.
And so I think that, communication and cooperation, when we teach peaceful conflict resolution, really communication and cooperation are so key. And so those things, it's back to being the change. So we need to be the change, and the school, not to put it all on the school, but the supports should be there in the classroom, outside the classroom, but in the school building, including, as you were saying, Kerry, outside, agencies and different people who have those skill sets. I'm a social worker. So, I mean, and I've done some of that work in the school. And there's all kinds of ways that it can be infused into the school, into the program, so that you actually, we have our kids camp coming up. This Camp Peace Prince will start on July 14th, and I'm going to say every time it's 8 to 13-year-olds, and then we have youth assistants. It's just a 2-week camp, Camp Peace Prince. But because of the way we approach things, starting with a peace agreement that the kids create, we don't tell them this is what you're going to do, this is what you can't do. No, we say, how do we need to be to do what we want to do here? And so they'll always come up with a good peace agreement. Then now that's the discipline. It's like, if people are acting out, are you doing that thing, of cooperating or being respectful or whatever it is that, and if it isn't, then, what might you do that might, or what are you trying to say? What do you want to say? Maybe you want to say it differently. But anyway, so these kids, when we bring them anywhere, I'm going to tell you that we get unasked for admiration and lauding of these kids as how good they are, how well behaved they are. Well, why? Because of the way of doing it, which is in this very much of, trying to be the change. And so when we're all doing that, and it works for everybody. So, the teachers yelling at students, of course, there are challenges. I'm not trying to say that there aren't, but there's a way of doing things that militates more towards a good result. And that's just what you're all talking about. And that discipline means disciplining means learning. That's right. The very word disciple. So it's not about you did something wrong, you should pay. And I want to go back to, and I thank you, Melanie, for your question. And we were going to get to it eventually, but I'm glad you two dealt with it. But I want to go back to John, and I do want you, for people who don't know, I did a very shorthand thing of your story, but please do tell your story, because I think it does illustrate so much. Well, there's implicit bias, and then there's also that confirmation of implicit bias that happens when people are being suspended. So, John?
I was on alternative school here in Buffalo after playing on one of the buses, and the bus driver told me to get off, and I started talking stuff to him. Well, it got me suspended and sent to the alternative school. The first thing I realized about the alternative school was it wasn't about learning no more. Mm-hmm. I was dealing with all of the people in the situation that the alternative school presented to me. So it's like the learning basically stopped. And I began to learn things that I shouldn't have learned, things that get me in trouble, how to skip, where to go, things that led me to going out in the streets and doing things at a young age that I shouldn't have been doing, and landed me in a youth home. After I did the time in a youth home for something I did, I came out 6 months later and got charged with a murder that I had nothing to do with. But it was because of the little things I had done, like skipping school, being on the bus, arguing with the bus driver. That's what put me in a position for them to look at me and accuse me of a murder. Mm-hmm. But it was because, I was out of school. I was doing little things I shouldn't have been doing. And I got put in a youth home for something I did do. But after that, they tagged the murder on me for something I didn't do, but it was because of the way I had been acting as a little bad child. That's what got them to looking at me and was able to allow them to try to pin a murder on me.
Right. It's just so tragic that's when they call it the school to prison pipeline, because then it's like, oh, well, this kid has been suspended before. Oh, he has. Well, then no wonder, and so then it just cements in. It's something about kids' self-image. It's about the way other people look at you. And then it's like, oh, well, this kid goes to an alternative school. Oh, well, no wonder we think he's a problem. No wonder. And that framing, that judging, that and the framing, well, just, is so horrific. Just like the Central Park Five, where they just wanted to make a big splash and say, oh, we're taking all these bad kids off the street, which was so heinous. And it was very clear. And I want to say I was there for a lot of John's trial. And it is heartbreaking to hear all the bad acts and all the finagling that went into framing these kids and suppression of evidence and all of that. And why did they think it was okay? Because they're taking these kids off the street who are problem kids anyway. That's what the mindset between the racism and then the little bits of things that anyway, it's just it's so terrible. And so it can either happen with the framing or even without the framing. It's just that people give up. Go ahead. What were you going to say, John?
Nothing. I regress.
I'd love to jump in.
Yeah, please do. So we'll go around again.
Mr. Walker, I think that your story really embodies how institutions like schools and the court system can fail Black and brown communities.
Yes.
I'm so sorry that, you dealt with that wrongful conviction and lost 20 plus years of your life, dealing with the probation. You said
and
40,
parole
and parole.
Yeah.
That's the type of time you never get back, and no amount of money can make up for that.
Right.
But if
But
I could get my story onto a kid to help a kid understand that this can happen to you too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be trying to do this, talk to the youth and try to tell them what happened to me in the hopes that, y'all don't let this happen to y'all. So
thank you for doing that.
Right.
I gotta say that one of the things that I see when I look at suspensions and the school to prison pipeline is the discipline almost becomes equivalent to a daily affirmation, right? When we try and build ourselves up, we say, "Oh, what's your daily mantra?" I know you've got one.
Well,
Miss Ross, I know
thou
you've got
art
one.
our mother and father. That's what
yours?
yes.
For these kids, they're hearing you're a bad kid day after day.
Right.
And they believe it after a while. You hear it so many times. I spent years as a public defender, and being able to shift to do this school discipline defense and represent these kids and try and intervene and connect them with that mentorship and help to change the trajectory of their lives. That was one of the most amazing switches I could have ever taken in my career. And I really do try and do that every time I interact with, a client. Where there is some trouble, we try and connect with that mentorship, because that school to prison pipeline, it will suck them up like a whirlpool,
Right.
a whirlpool.
Right.
And decades of your life can just be gone.
and I'm an example of that, though.
Yeah.
Example, I don't mind being used to try to teach kids. Use me as an example that that's not what they want to do. So they life away. But that's what when they throwing their life away out here. They're not even aware of some of the things that the pothole and traps that's set for them.
Right.
Set it right out there, step right into the trap. Next thing you know, you're in jail somewhere. But
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kerry.
I want to reiterate, John, that your story is the story of so many of our kids, especially our Black and brown kids, right?
Yes.
And it starts. For me, I see it starting even at the classroom level, right? We have when we kick kids out of class. And then, we send the message to them that, that you're not welcome here. And then we expect them to go back the next day and start it all over again, right? And a lot of times we do that without any repair to that relationship, right? Or without building that relationship in the first place. What you had talked about earlier, Vicki, was the ownership. Like when you're creating those norms with your campers, they're taking ownership over their behavior and over those norms. And so that's that. When I talked earlier about that tier 1 preventative restorative practices at schools, like that's what's needed. We need to start with that community building in each one of those classrooms, because when they feel welcomed, when they feel loved, when they feel nourished in the classroom, and they know that even if they mess up, like sometimes we do need to remove a scholar from class because they are being disruptive. And what we don't want to do, we've got teachers that have, sometimes 30, 32 kids in a classroom, and we can't allow one child to distract from learning of those other, 30 children that are in there. So there is a need sometimes to remove them from that environment. But what needs to happen is they need to be able to go somewhere to reset and then return to the classroom. So there's the 3 R's, right? Remove, reset, return. And that's also a mindset shift that has to happen with teachers, in that, okay, you're having an issue right now. I can't allow you to disrupt the community that we have built here. Please go and go to whatever that space is in your school. We have a help zone. So whatever that space is, please go to help zone, reset, and then you will be welcome back in here when you are ready to honor the agreements that you have agreed to, because you have ownership over that, over those norms in that community. And I think that's really important, because once you start, once we have scholars that are kicked out of class and we send the message that they're not welcome back, and then we expect them to come back in and feel safe to learn that that's a safe space for them. That's, even as adults, we don't expect people to do that. Why are we asking our kids to do that? And then I'd also, speak to the suspension part in terms of absences, right?
Right.
New York State says if you miss 2 school days a month, you are chronically absent. Yet, at the same time, we can suspend kids for 5, 7, 10 days. And that's at the hands of us, right? Ultimately, at the hands of the people that are in control. So, we're sending mixed messages even there, because when we are suspending kids at such young ages. So my grandchildren, they had gone to a daycare, and the daycare was talking about suspending my grandson at 4 years old. And I was like, excuse me, right, for disrespect. And I said, and I think this is also where we need to empower and educate parents on how to advocate for their kids, right?
Yes.
Because I said to them, and when you hear that your child or your grandchild is being disrespectful, like that goes back on you. So you automatically want to be like defensive and, look at the child and be like, how dare you do that? But, I took a step back and I said, could you please tell me what disrespect looks like, what that looked like, and what that sounded like? And really, there was a lot of bias behind. I found in the conversation with the daycare provider that it was really more based in their values and their bias than it was in my 4-year-old's actions. So, I said, absolutely not. I said, number one, I will not pick him up from daycare. Number two, he will be back there tomorrow, and we will talk about how you can address this behavior in a way that keeps him in the classroom environment. And I carry that throughout, even through their elementary schools. I have the same conversations when I get those reports. Please tell me what that looks like and sounds like. And please tell me the specific behavior. I don't want to hear that they were disrespectful. I want you to name the behavior, and I want you to tell me what intervention you applied to that behavior first before you gave me a call, right? And then I will work with you after that, and we will work through what will work for for my specific child. So some of this is empowering parents and educating parents on how to speak with schools, because I think that we have a lot of policing around language. We have a lot of policing of bodies and control over bodies, and even control or policing on how parents approach us. We have to drop our own biases and what we think advocating looks like for our children, and hear and listen to what parents are saying and what our kids are saying and what they're telling us. And then we have to adjust our policies or our interventions accordingly, because it's on us. We are charged as the educators to educate these kids.
John?
I was feeling what you were saying, so
Yeah.
you were saying agreement. I think that you were saying something about when y'all suspend the kids or send the kids to the whatever room. That's where intervention should come in at.
Exactly.
And maybe parents should be sitting in that room when they send them there to try to have a conversation with them. They might open up to some parents. If you had 3 or 4 parents sitting in that room when they got suspended, you sent them there. Maybe the parent, that's the time a parent can say some real good stuff to them.
So thank you. So parents, or, there is a parent enrichment program in a lot of schools, a parent enrichment center in a lot of schools. And the other thing I'd say, as a social worker, I can't help saying social workers. We've got social workers. We need plenty of social workers, restorative justice practitioners, people who know how to communicate. And the communicating piece is so important to build trust and break down what is actually going on, and model the behaviors that we want to see. So just yelling back at the kid or judging, is not what's going to help. And certainly, it doesn't mean that no child should ever be put out of school. But in general, back to that shows that the school isn't ready, hasn't been given the resources, hasn't amassed the right combination of resources, and provided the right culture that is going to help lead to these restorative practices and these peaceful conflict resolutions, these resolutions of whatever problems are going on. So if we just do one more go round on sort of what does that look like, what we'd like to see, instead of people getting suspended. So Sam?
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see restorative practice used with fidelity, building to building within the district. We have a wonderful policy that is, part of the Code of Conduct. Mm-hmm. I want to see that as something that is really enacted in the lives of our students. I'd also like to, like you said, we're in a society and a culture where this is the way that it happens now. This is the system. So what I would like to see is the implementation that results in equity. When we look at the numbers and the data, I want to see equity between the opportunities available to all children, as well as equity in the discipline used for all children. I would love to, if you go to the Partnership for Public Good, I actually spent probably a year working to develop a suspension policy that we are hoping is implemented by the Buffalo Public Schools that would specifically almost eliminate, severely strategically reduce the amount of suspensions pre-K through 3rd grade.
Especially, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
These are when kids are learning to read, they're learning to write, they're learning their math as they're preparing for their 3rd grade testing, the first time they do their state exams. We want to see those low-level infractions like insubordination and disrespectful behavior. We want to see those as lower level disciplinary offenses that are handled within the school rather than subject to discipline. We want to see a cap of 20 days on suspensions. 20 school days. That's basically a month on the calendar. So we want to see, if a kid does need to be suspended, that they don't lose a whole year. Because right now, a child can be suspended for up to 180 days. I would love to see, our community coming together and supporting solutions, not suspensions, reaching out
Right.
to their assembly members and their state senators so that we can pass solutions, not suspensions, that would enact all of these items, which were recommendations from the New York State Education Department in 2022 that are being used in different cities like Ithaca, like Syracuse, like New York City, that have reduced their suspension rates.
Right.
I would love to see Buffalo lead in education rather than leading the state in suspensions. So I will continue to do everything that I can to be an advocate for students one-on-one when they need representation in the community, when you need an explanation of rights for your community group, your church group. Reach out to schools at WNYLC.net. You'll be in touch with me. We do those presentations for free. I'd love to come out to your community group, your church group, and, explain what's legal, what's not. Is it okay to just send your kid home? Do you need a paper telling you what your kid did? Well, actually, they do have to put it in writing. There is a formal process, especially if it's going to be one of those long-term suspensions. You shouldn't be getting a message on Class Dojo saying, keep your kid home for the next 5 days.
Right. No, thank you, Sam. And Kerry?
Yeah, I'm with you, and I would also like to see support for those support services, that financial support, right? We have to fund. It's interesting to me that as a society, and I'm speaking very generally here, right? As a society, we typically have no problem spending money for more carceral measures, right? We have no money. We have no problem spending money on more police, on more security, on electronic surveillance. We have no problem spending money on that. And to me, that's a moral statement on how we view our children, how we view our society. So I'd like to see more support for anti-bias training. I'd like to see more support for restorative practices training. I'd like to see more expansion of mental health teams and social workers and counselors, more support from community organizations and our mental health providers. I mean, I think that's an area that the state needs some work in anyways. I mean, when you go to try to get any kind of mental health support, you're waiting months before you can get into a provider, right? So that means that we have a gap in our support services just overall. But on top of that, I think that we need to start with a goal. And the goal is what will change the behavior, right? Like we get lost in what the punishment is, and all we need to do is look at the data. And if you have a child that's been suspended 5 times during a school year, or has 35 or 48 or 63 referrals, then what your intervention is doing is not working.
Right.
So we need to have a conversation with that child and find out what it is that will help where the skill deficit is, first of all, and then what we need to do to change the behavior. I mean, if my grandchildren are not cleaning up their room and I'm continuing to ground them and they're still not cleaning up their room, I'm not going to continue to apply that consequence. I'm going to find something that is going to work. And so I think we need to apply that to schools, because more suspensions is not the answer, because it's not working. So I'd like to see expansion of mediation programs. So our
Right.
building has a very rich mediation program. We have a peer mediation program, and that's it's taken over a year to to implement that and put into place. And initially, we had scholars that were saying, well, we don't want to mediate. Okay, well, that's all right. Then what we're going to do is we're going to mediate with you separately and the other scholar separately, and you will come up with an agreement separately, and then we will show you each that. And if you agree, then this conflict is over, right? And if you don't, then this is the consequence that comes after that. And then whatever that consequence is, it doesn't have to be suspension. It's whatever in that moment is the issue and is going to get to the heart of the conflict to change the behavior. So we need to have expansion of those programs. We have a peer accountability council. So when we have long-term suspensions, what we do is a scholar will go in front of a jury of their peers and get sanctions that they have to do. Part of it is counseling. They have to meet with a social worker. If it was drug related at all, they have to go through the marijuana intervention program or vaping intervention program that is restorative in nature. And once they do all of those or satisfy those sanctions, they get to come back from that suspension early. And we have dedicated staff people to work with that. So, it's about that funding, and it's about really pouring into and valuing those programs. Lastly, I would just say that what we need to do is support our kids and them as children. I mean, there's so much adultification, especially at the high school level of kids. Like, you've got 14, 15, 16-year-old kids whose brains are not even developed yet, and they're making decisions, and it's up to us to guide them and direct them in the right direction. And some of them, they may not get it right now, but we're planting seeds along the way and working with them to get to the bottom of it, so that they're there in school to get those credits and to graduate and move on to whatever it is they're going to do next in their life.
Absolutely. So true. So needed. And John, what's your thought?
My final thoughts is that I just think it should
your
be
final thoughts.
more
now.
parent participation. That's all. That's my big thing. More parent participation.
It's spoken as a true parent. So
Yeah.
I know you've been such a great parent.
My
And
son.
yeah,
But if my story can help out in any kind of way, or my appearances or something can help out in any kind of way, I am open to that. Yeah.
well, thank you. And you do that, and we're so grateful. Thank you so much for sharing your story now and in other venues, other things that we've talked about that can be done and will be done. I want to say this has been such a powerful program. I appreciate so much the work that all three of you have done in different ways, and sometimes in very different ways, but about trying to get more justice in our society. And we just have a lot of work to do, of course. Thank you, Kerry, for bringing up, the moral budget that we have, or the immoral budget, I should say, where we can't shovel money fast enough. Sam had just mentioned that Buffalo Public Schools has cut social workers while increasing security. And of course, what that's going to mean is it's counterproductive, because more security, there is no violent solution. So power over instead of power with is not helping us. That's where we need the transformations that we need at the social level. We need them in the schools. We want to change the culture to a healthy, loving culture where truth and love are respected and used to work through in communication and cooperation. I want to say each one of you has done so much towards that, does so much towards that, and that Sam, Kerry, John, each one of you. So I really can't thank you enough. Thank you for this show. Thank you for your work every day. And we've been talking peace together, and this is Talking Peace We've been talking peace through truth and love.